Yeah, so this is take two of the Venezuela update. And, I actually received a comment yesterday about it. But earlier today, I did do kind of a stream from my car that didn't really make much sense because the network kept conking out. So this is a redo. This is a redo. So, once again, I have to I have to kind of do a disclaimer every time because some people are so stupid. They think that because you oppose the Venezuelan government, you're for U.S. intervention there. So I'd like to clarify, even though I'm wearing a Cobra Commander t-shirt at the moment, I am still against U.S. military intervention in Venezuela or the rest of South America and Central America for that matter. So I haven't changed that. And the clowns that keep asserting that, oh, you're a neocon, or whatever, or you're basically a Koch brothers guy. Those people can basically go suck it. Anyway, the update is that apparently the skirmish that was on the border in Brazil, it killed two unarmed people who were there trying to go over the border and get supplies from the humanitarian workers that are on the other side. I think they're on behalf of USAID, if I'm not mistaken. So that doesn't mean well for Venezuela, because I believe tomorrow there's supposed to be some sort of larger effort on the part of some of these activists to do the same thing, and it's apparent that that these people are going to have to deal with the Maduro regime trying to limit the entrance of aid in Venezuela by any means possible, including using live ammo. So a lot of these people who are stalwarts against U.S. intervention, who are on the left, who continuously say that this is a neocon plot to bring down the regime or whatever, well, most of them have already admitted that Maduro himself is basically running the country into the ground. But they say it's not his fault because of U.S. sanctions. Whose fault? Now, the U.S. sanctions, by the way, they were only instituted in the past 2 or 3 years. And most of them have not the closest connection to actual, the actual population. Now, I would say that I don't think sanctions really matter anyway. I think if they would have not even imposed any sanctions, it's very likely Venezuela would have still undergone a massive contraction of the economy anyway. It's just that in the climate of today, they have so much backing from the governments of Cuba, Iran, China, and Russia that really Maduro could have done anything with impunity. People are basically fleeing the country any way they can anyway. And yet people are of the mind, well, what's really important is to keep Venezuela free from U.S. intervention. I would agree with that, but I'd like to add that if you're against American intervention in Venezuela, you should probably try to be against the intervention of all these other countries there. But you're not. Most of these people see it as a positive that China, Russia, Iran, and Cuba have a base in Latin America because they think that it's a good balance against U.S. imperialism. But they don't realize really that it actually demonstrates the hollowness of the Chavista narrative and what Chavez was trying to do. You see, Chavez and his people, okay? It's kind of distracting doing it this way because I'm looking down my hallway while doing this. This is what I call the Uygur ObnoxiousScope. So it's that view. So if you guys like these handheld videos, let me know. Otherwise, I can just go back to doing desktop ones. But what Chavez was trying to do was essentially take Latin America and make it into a large block of nations that would be a counterbalance to the U.S. That's what UNASUR was. That's why UNASUR was trying to integrate these Latin American countries like Ecuador, Brazil, Uruguay. To some extent, I think Nicaragua was involved. They were trying to integrate them as well as through ALBA, the Alliance of Bolivarian Liberation whatever in Latin America. Those those countries were supposed to be the next big block of countries to counter the U.S., just like the EU is doing. So essentially, it's a much more left-wing Latin American version of the EU. That's what UNASUR is. Well, you come to today. There's nothing tying UNASUR together. So who is keeping Venezuela afloat? I mean, all of these countries that were once her main allies, Ecuador, Brazil, they're not really cooperating with Venezuela anymore. Ecuador, I believe, even pulled out its stake in Telesur, which was the big broadcasting entity that was a cooperation between all of these countries that are part of ALBA. So now they have to depend on non-Latin countries as their allies. And those countries are going to, in order to sustain Maduro, they're going to have to invest much more of a human element into there. They're going to have to send more people. They're going to have to send more talent. They're going to have to send more aid. And that's exactly. And apparently, while at the same time that he claims that there is no humanitarian crisis in Venezuela, Maduro and his government are awaiting humanitarian aid from Russia. So it's not that they don't need aid, it's that they want it from Russia as opposed to the US. Now, I think that Russia, of course, has a right to look after their interests, and certainly they can gain from Venezuela in a sense. But that's not good governance. When you say, well, first we're going to deny for 3 or 4 years that our country is basically falling apart. Our main business, which is oil, by the way, we can't even manage competently. And we're going to eliminate the rest of the economy slowly and scare all of the professionals out of the country. Then we're going to get all of the middle class workers to leave the country. Then we're going to basically barricade the poor into these ghettos and force them to basically line up for food and stuff like that and be part of these missions. That was the Maduro policy. And they were all the time saying, well, this isn't really a crisis. It's just that some people, some commodities aren't available, and whatever. Then they now say, well, we don't want your aid. We don't want the medicines that need to come in, because even though we have fully universal health care, there's nothing to give. People can show up at a hospital, they probably can't even get a medication for possibly years, and meanwhile they're dealing with with chronic pain. They might be dealing with an infection. They might be dealing with some sort of high blood pressure or something. They can't manage they get free health care that doesn't provide them with anything. Do you realize how ridiculous it is that they're refusing medical supplies at the border with Brazil, and having to kill 2 people just in order to stand up for their national pride against the United States? Which, I'm not for the policy that Mike Pence and Donald Trump and the rest of the administration are pursuing as far as confrontation with Venezuela. But I think in a certain way, if I may play devil's advocate on that, talking about the logic behind a policy that I think is not the one I would do and I think is wrong. It is exposing the fact that Venezuela's government really is not about serving the citizens of the country. It's about preserving its own rule, preserving the order that they've imposed. And that's really why you have to watch out. This weekend, I fear a lot of people are going to die. And unfortunately, nobody gains from that. Unless you consider the fact that it's possible that Venezuela could see the end of the Chavez era. So I think that's gonna be it. I will talk to you guys later, and please like this video, subscribe to the channel, subscribe to me, by the way, on BitChute as well, so you can get all of the updates and new videos as they come out. And also, somebody complained about my first ADOS video. They said, well, you're not from the black community, you shouldn't be able to talk about it. Screw you. I don't tell you what to talk about. You can go fuck yourself, I basically told them. YouTube is where you go to be able to express your views on topics that you can't just walk up to somebody on the street and talk about. That's the benefit of YouTube. I don't need some dumbass to tell me what topics I can address. So that's about it. And have a great weekend. I'll probably talk to you guys tomorrow night.